I'll start the recording. Hello, David. Can you hear us?
He may be in the midst of different connection
That's
process.
true. That's true too. Yeah.
His little phone is gray, which is never a good sign.
Right. 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 Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started in the interest of time, I know we're going to hold off on one of the discussions, the assessment framework, until Amber gets here, because that has to do a lot with what Data 1 has already done. So I just wanted to apprise people really of what we were planning. Who else came on? Someone else came on?
This is David.
Oh, hi,
Good
David.
morning.
Good. Good. You're on phone then. Great.
Yep.
Great. Good.
I'm in.
All right. So we're just getting started. I've got the agenda up, and okay. So the first agenda item. Oh, first of all, did anybody have anything else that they wanted to add or talk about today? No. Okay. Good. So plans related to the Clearinghouse at the AGU. We're going to have a pretty good presence at the AGU help desk this year. I see. Is everybody? I know, David, you're not going, but Carl, are you going to AGU?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. And I'm pretty sure Matt is too, right? And Bruce, are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Of course you are. You're at ESIP. Yeah. So anyway, we're on the. Aaron essentially plugged me into the help desk at places where other people, where there are openings, so that we could do various things related to the Clearinghouse, including demos where we might also be doing some usability testing of researchers, and then there are workshops that are either 15 to 30 minutes at various intervals, and I'll be prepared to do different kinds of workshops there, probably less about what the Clearinghouse is. Then hopefully I'll be able to do some kind of, not exactly Pathfinder, but illustrate different topics that are covered within the Clearinghouse, so that it's kind of an approach, an explanation of the possibility of finding different topics and just kind of illustrating what's in there. And then we've got a banner that Aaron wants to be able to show, which we need to work on yet, and then a postcard, which should be kind of fun. I've got something that I can actually show here in a second if you want. And then we're also talking about stickers. So like the PICA stickers that for ESIP or data stewardship actually, that were given out last summer, I guess it was. So if you all are interested in seeing any of that, we're working on, let's see, I wonder if I can have that. I might have up the images here. No, I don't. Shoot.
And Bruce, is that the link that you shared in the chat?
So I just went out and tried to find cute Scarlet Tanager graphic, and I put that in the chat. That's possibly, they may let us use that if that works for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Scarlet Tanager would be great. So I found a couple of images too that I was going to send to people, but
can you see the one in the chat?
let me pull that one up here, just since we have that. Oh yeah. Yeah. Do they need to be this kind of anime sort of thing, or can it actually be a photograph?
Well, we've used drawings before. I mean, the pica and the
right,
and they've all been that, but they don't have to. If you guys don't want this, I can just say no.
No, I actually like it. I was just thinking I had found them. To see if I can actually just find them while we're here. It's just it's important to get some feedback here of the ones that I had found. I was about to send them to Denise, but
I like the simplicity and sort of bold visibility of this one.
Yeah, the colors are great. The black and red really kind of stand out. So let's see. Yeah, let me put up one I found. So this is one I found, another one here, and then this one. So I found a toucan. You know, you can do something like "you too can," or something lame like that for the language. It sounds like there's not much room for text though on the sticker, right, Bruce?
Right, especially
Yeah.
if you're going to have the DMT.
Yeah, that long name.
Clearinghouse, right?
Right.
Management working group.
Right.
Though I have to say that a subset of just the head and beak of the toucan with the "you toucan" short phrase has a nice visual and verbal ring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And then we can also shorten the whole thing. You know, if we have the just say data management training and ESIP there, then people can actually probably find it too. So that's a thought. And then this guy, where is this? This honey eater is just, you know, too cute for words. He's also red, but and oops, oh, this is the one. This is the one we're going to use. The image we're going to use for the postcard. This little guy, and it'll be something like find. Let's see. Do I have the next image? No, I don't have it. Something like find it when you need it with this little guy with, you know, on the front, and then a silhouette of him on the back. And hopefully people will get the message. I sent this to the designer, and she got the connection right away. But I asked my husband about it. He said, "Oh, did this bird is it a raptor? Did it just kill another bird?" And I thought, oh God, I hope it. So I told him what the connection was. You know, no, he's nesting or he's preening, and he went, "Oh, okay, that's different." So hopefully people will get
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a sparrow.
You killed nesting material.
Yeah, something. It's a sparrow, so I mean it can't be killing too much, but anyway. So okay, well I'll just send them on. The toucan, just 3 images to Denise, and then Bruce, what you found too. I mean, whatever works. That would be. We can talk about it. If you're interested in following that conversation, let me know, and I can include you on the links. But anyway, that's what's going on there. So kind of fun. Thankfully, Erin is helping out with that one. So let's see, where is that agenda again? This is not something I normally do, is that kind of thing, but there you go. Okay. So the usability testing we're talking about, I talked to Sophie about this a little bit a couple days ago, and we thought, and also with Erin, and we thought, you know, since AGU is really focused more on researchers rather than the other side, the contributors would be the other client of the clearinghouse, we thought it might be useful to kind of test the assumptions we're making about, you know, how and whether people who are looking for data management training would actually use the clearinghouse. So I'm going to be setting up some pre-questions at Sophie's suggestion about, you know, to ask people as they come to the help desk and are interested in finding out more about it, and kind of conduct little interviews and track that information there. We're also hoping to find ways to track the topics that come up when people refer to the clearinghouse at, say, the reference desk itself. So I'll be working with hopefully Ruth Doer, who had that idea to track the topics, and Dan Keys to and whoever, I guess Erin is really the person in charge of the reference desk per se, but trying to set up ways of tracking that kind of thing as effortlessly as possible as, you know, as the days go on at AGU. So I don't know if you have any questions about that or suggestions, happy to hear them. And if you want to stop by at some point, you know, and even, you know, be as researchers, answer some of the questions too, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
So Okay, well, anything else? We can come back to that if you have any questions about that. Then, so plans for ESIP winter. Let's start with, again, the assessment framework is the one that's first on the agenda at ESIP winter on Tuesday, but let's talk about the next two until Amber gets here. And maybe also let's start with 3, the strategies for governance, because that, since Bruce is on as well, and Carl is on, and Matt. What we are thinking of doing there is starting a conversation, hopefully with people who are interested in possibly being on advisory boards or some kind of mechanism for managing or informing the strategic direction of the Clearinghouse, but also, and this might be a separate group, helping out with the editorial and review processes that we need to develop as the Clearinghouse gets more used and starts scaling up. So I had talked with Erin about this a couple days ago, and she suggested that we talk with Bruce about this too, because Bruce, you've been working with the archive or the preprint folks at ESIP, right? And do you want to just talk a little bit about that and what's been happening?
So the Earth Archive, it started out as the Earth Science preprint cluster after the winter meeting, and it went to then a bunch of telecons with various providers of platforms and archive technologies, and then that caught the attention of some people who were not in ESIP, and so we started a Slack channel for it, and then one of the volunteers from England had the Earth Archive Twitter handle and sent out and it was very, media savvy, sent out a request for anyone who wants to show up and be part of the system. And we ended up getting 150 people.
Oh, wow.
100 of whom volunteered to be on the advisory council, and others just wanted to be informed in different ways. And so we figured that what we wanted to do was get as great a diversity as we could. So we took the 100 people and we sort of figured out where they fit into different, different stages in their career, different sort of genders, different geographical locations, and some different institutional things, big institutions, small institutions, and so we put them into these buckets, and then we just chose at random.
Interesting.
And so there was no election. So because we figured this is actually a service. I mean, it's just like ESIP. ESIP elections are always kind of strange because you get elected to do a bunch of work. It's like,
right.
And you're not being paid. So it is a service opportunity, and so we want people to be thankful for offering their service and not feel they have to compete with someone they don't know, in some weird election to get on the board. So, so I guess my recommendation, and it's worked out really well. And since we're in 11 different time zones, we're using Lumio. Does anyone here know about Lumio?
I've used it before, and I can't remember where though or when.
Okay, so Lumio it comes out of New Zealand. It's a platform for online asynchronous discussion and decision making. It was built by a bunch of people from the Occupy movement in New Zealand. So it's sort of meant to replicate that kind of super democratic participatory governance in an online situation. I can let me take the thing real quick, and I'll just see. And so that's how we get ongoing Um, let me just get
Participation.
Chrome. Yeah. Okay. Are you seeing now the Earth Archive Lumio?
Yep.
And so we have 49 people in the main right now. This could climb up to hundreds of people in the main group, and then the subgroup is the advisory council. And so the advisory council can have their own discussions, which are all public, but they're the ones discussing things. And if there has to be a vote, and then there's a way to set up voting, and voting is all open. And it's like in a consensus format where you can agree, you can abstain, you can object, which means you're still okay, or you can block something. Which means that the group needs to settle something before moving ahead.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's we tried to use Lumio at ESIP for gathering some information for a sort of a one-time NSF call for information, request for information. But Lumio is really better for sort of ongoing governance. You know, something that's going to be around for a few years, so people can hop on and it can be as active as they want, and anyone can set up a thread for a discussion, and then people can set up their own decision. Says we need to have here's a proposal for something that needs to be decided upon. So there's that, and it's so I don't know how big a scale you're going to get of volunteers going to, what your governance situation is, how many people, and let me give it back to you.
Okay.
Nancy.
Well, let's see, show my screen. I think it's up in the air. I mean, part of the impetus for doing this, besides the fact that we've needed it for a while, is that, as we're going for funding in different kinds of scenarios, like the IML, we hope to be able to put a full proposal into IMLS with a number of different organizations involved. Carl as a PI, others as involved in various ways. ESIPs indirectly or directly as well, but also including people who are really knowledgeable and active in either providing data management training or interested in data management practices, best practices, which is a little bit of a broader area and should feed the training really. It's unclear how big it could get. It seems like it could be. It's definitely international. I mean, institutions all over the world are interested in this topic and are doing things related to it, creating resources or talking about curricula or blah blah blah. So it seems like there might be a real possibility for making this a bigger group. Now, the other context of it is that I think you probably all know that we've been talking with the Science Gateway people, Science Gateway Community Institute that's the NSF funded project, about moving and Erin and I went to that boot camp in October, and the whole discussion there was of moving from a clearinghouse as a kind of a registry or catalog into more of a quote unquote gateway, which would be, the vision would be, different kinds of services related to and facilitating conversations about education and training and data management practices. So part of what we're interested in doing, in the longer vision is to move towards that direction if we can find funding. And then, of course, what we've written up as a possibility for the IMLS grant would kind of move us that way as well. And there are a number of organizations that have expressed interest in working with us on that. So Carl, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the IMLS, the plans a little bit too, so it's not just me.
Sure, and as a matter of fact, the clock is still ticking on. We haven't heard anything back on the preliminary proposal that we submitted by their September 1st deadline. The deadline for submission of invited full proposals is mid-January, which might get kind of ugly if they don't tell us soon.
I know.
Actually, it's likely to get ugly anyway, yeah. but
right.
But it's getting uglier by the day. And so we're still waiting on that. But yeah, that was basically a $250,000 ask for over 2 years to facilitate bringing folks together around providing advisement for how to organize and structure and more effectively discover and access content, setting up a broader advisory group to contribute to that, but then of course also adding into the infrastructure that supports the characterization of the various training materials that are available in the Clearinghouse, moving to a point where where search is enhanced through the adoption of some more standard vocabulary for tagging materials, categorizing materials in different ways in terms of target audience and such.
Right.
But yeah, we await our invitation from IMLS to contribute the full proposal, and there would be a flurry of activity to get that proposal put together by their January 16th deadline.
Right. And so, I mean, but even if that doesn't fly for some reason, then, I think there's enough interest to really kind of, try to find other funding. Maybe an eager grant is a possibility through NSF or something, to kind of keep it going. And especially if we build momentum anyway. So part of the idea for the session at ESIP Winter would be to kind of discuss these kinds of prospects and what might work best given what our goals are and what, the interests, what collaborative or interests there are to kind of work together with this.
Right. And I think, yeah, and to build on that, being able to start working on some of the activities that we proposed as a part of the IMLS grant that don't necessarily require funding, but more coordination of new contributors or outreach to folks that certainly expressed strong interest in participating when we were lining up folks to serve on the advisory board or in other capacities in conjunction with the proposal. So I think there are certainly activities we can move forward on, even in the absence of the funding from IMLS.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. In terms of the immediate need to plan a session at ESIP Winter, I mean, it seems as if people are present physically who could talk about it. I mean, Bruce, if you could talk about the experience of the Earth Science Archive, and Carl is there, and other people are either present or could call in, then we could have a discussion about, and hopefully come to some decisions about how to proceed with it. So I think we could contact the people who expressed interest on the IMLS grant and others who didn't want to be part of the grant necessarily, but are interested in the topic. So maybe have, kind of a little bit of a panel, some different people talking about, the context and possibilities, and then to have a discussion. How does that sound?
That works well for me, because I think being able to look at opportunities for enhancing the discoverability and being able to cast the net even more widely in terms of possibly moving, slowly evolving from that clearinghouse to gateway model, where there's an additional layer of metadata that can sit on top of registered materials, I think can be really helpful.
Okay. That sounds okay. Bruce, do you think you might be available to help out with that kind of explanation, or somebody who's working with archive? If you're okay, that'd be great. Okay, well that sounds great. Then why don't we, Carl? Maybe I'll work with you on offline about getting more people invited and see what we can scare up. Okay, that sounds great. Great. I think I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a really interesting discussion, especially if we bring in new people talking about it too. So great, thank you. Okay, I see Amber's on too. I want to make sure we talk about that other one then. Hello, Amber.
Hi, Nancy. Apologies for being late.
That's okay. I knew you said you were going to be a little bit late, so that's fine. So we're just talking about plans for ESIP winter, and I wanted to, one of the other sessions is that assessment framework that we talked about at our last call, and I wanted to tell you what I've been talking with Sophie about how we can possibly do this, since she wasn't able to make the call today, and Aaron as well, and just wanted to throw out some ideas about how that could be structured. And to give context for everyone else who may not have been part of that discussion, what we talked about last time, and also have included in, again, that IMLS grant is something we would want to do, is either to develop or adapt an assessment framework for the resources that are in the clearinghouse in order to give people, users, the opportunity to, kind of annotate or make comments or recommendations, or, about the resources that they use, or go through an evaluation process, just sort of provide some mechanism for comment and either ranking or rating, or all of that's a little bit up in the air about how to do it for the resources that are in the inventory. And then either Amber or Sophie pointed out that Data One had already created an evaluation framework, or actually you call it something else, an evaluation tool, I guess, but that was a possibility to even test that and see how it works. So
I think, Nancy, the work that was done at Data One, and actually Sophie was working on it as part of her internship when she was working with Data One, isn't so much an evaluation mechanism for the resources themselves, but more of an evaluation of the learning or the change of awareness or impact of using the resources on the end community. So our evaluation tool is an assessment tool for assessing how the teaching went, as opposed to the resource itself. So it's slightly different to the way you just described it. And so I don't know whether it would directly correspond. Obviously, I think there's a lot of information in there, and you are welcome to use them. But the purpose of our education evaluation instrument was that we had a lot of people using the materials, ourselves included, and we always liked to do kind of pre and post surveys when we do workshops to get an understanding of how the workshop went. I mean, one, it's nice to generate those metrics for demonstrating our impact, but more importantly, it's useful to know whether people got something out of the training experience. And so we had interacted with a number of other organizations that were putting on workshops that asked whether we had a survey instrument that they could use for assessing their workshops. And so it had been this kind of email sharing that was happening within the community, and we decided to kind of make that as a more formal or accessible tool. And so what Sophie was doing as part of the internship with the Data One Community Engagement and Outreach Working Group was identifying those questions that needed to be asked, those questions that would be valuable to be asked, and separating them according to the type of learning material, the duration of the learning experience, and also the objectives of the learning material. So obviously, having a 4-page survey wasn't appropriate if you had done a 1-hour webinar, for example. That would be more appropriate for having done, a 3-day intensive workshop. And so we had scaled it according to whether it was kind of a few hours, a multi-hour stroke 1 day, or a multi-day type of event. And so you can filter the questions. Oh, thanks for pulling that up.
Yeah.
And so if you go to the actual EVA evaluation tool, you can filter the questions according to the duration of the training. If you can go to the, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. According to the duration of the training, whether it is intended as a pre-training evaluation, because some, again, depending on the duration and the nature of the training, it makes sense to have a pre and post type of survey versus just a single survey at the end. And then also the medium in which you are conducting the training, whether you're doing it in person, online, or whether it's a resource that people are using for self-paced learning. And so all of those questions are in there. You can download them in document format. Because we didn't expect people would necessarily want to take our resource and just apply it as is. We imagined they were going to want to customize it according to the language of the training resources that they're using. So you can download it in doc format and Excel format, which actually provides you with the metadata behind the questions and the thinking. And it's also available as Qualtrics, because a lot of people are using the Qualtrics, and so you can just download the full QSF file and edit within Qualtrics as well. We haven't been able to integrate with SurveyMonkey just because of the way that SurveyMonkey works. Is if you share a survey, you either have to pay for a level of account that we don't have at Data One, or you pay per share. And so Qualtrics didn't have that constraint, and SurveyMonkey did. And what we are working on doing is we have it in a Google Docs format, and so people can use the Google form, and we're just cleaning that up as well right now.
Well, I think, there are a couple, besides what the assessment framework approach that we were doing, one of the other things that we've talked about being interested in, and Matt, you've expressed this as well, but most recently, and that is doing evaluation of some of the resources in the Clearinghouse, just to see, what the impact is and whether they need to be changed. I'm thinking of the ESIP short course as an example, because those were created and published 2012, 2013, and a number of times we've talked about, are those still current? Are people still learning from them? We've never been able to do that assessment of the impact in terms of the learning itself. So, so for purposes of just exploring different kinds of assessment and so on, it still, I think, might well be useful to have in the session, have this available, maybe have a couple of different kinds of modules available for people to run through, to actually do the modules. So short course, they're between 7 and 12 minutes, and the Data One modules are, I don't know how long the next actually go necessarily, but maybe we could pick ones that could be done, reasonably within 15 minutes or so, and then have a survey instruments that we've put together from this to have people do the assessment of what they learn in the session, and then finally have come back together afterwards, give that half an hour, and then talk about how that worked as an assessment, as a evaluation framework, an evaluation tool itself. Maybe that's the kind of thing we had talked about maybe being useful, and it could accomplish a couple things. First, looking at this tool itself and how it works, how people understand it, and so on, and then looking at some of the resources as well. So, what do people think about that? Would that work, or something like that?
So I think using this tool to evaluate the short course material, that's exactly as it was intended to do. An evaluation of this tool, I think, is better done by the people that are using the tool to create a survey than by the people that are filling out the survey itself, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, the other approach may be a little more meta than people are interested in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Please evaluate our evaluation.
Uh-huh.
This is Matt.
Yeah.
I think this issue of evaluation and sort of value judgments of resources is a general challenge, right? We talked about a lot in the data repository world about what's the value and impact of our assets and our collections and our services, et cetera. And I think this is just an example of that as well. Would there be a way to sort of use that kind of issue as a sort of more general, use the session, sorry, as a more general discussion of that? How do people go about trying to get this information about usage of, maybe it's educational resources, maybe it's data collections, maybe it's software, could be a variety of things. Because I think it's a general issue, and there's probably no one sort of universal solution or even sort of one comprehensive solution. But maybe if you could sort of get a bunch of options on the plate, and I think I like this tool that the Data One has put together, and then sort of look at them and maybe have some discussion about in this context this has worked well, in this context this has worked well. In some ways, the sort of gathering of testimonials is kind of the best way to do things. In some other circumstances, a survey approach is better. So I know Data One's thought about that a lot as well. But that's just maybe a suggestion, sort of comment about, can it be done a bit more generally? So maybe this is one case to look at. How do we evaluate this tool being the Clearinghouse and these kinds of resources? But maybe there's other cases of data collections, maybe you could find a couple others and sort of have a set of presentations on that issue of assessment. I'm just looking at your, I don't know what the full title of the session is, but assessment framework is certainly a general thing,
right?
If that's something that could be done.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Matt, we've thought a little bit about this. I don't think we have the solution, and I think we're always looking for the solution. Metrics and evaluation of impact on the community is really important for so many of us, and I think this tool is great in the sense that you have a tool with which to collect information, but the way in which you go about collecting that information and getting, as you said, sometimes the testimonials is the best thing, sometimes it's the survey, getting people to respond. We've had a hard time thinking about how to get feedback on our education materials. I mean, when we do in-person training, we have a captive audience and we can get these assessments done, no problem, and this is primarily how we use this particular tool. But when it comes to our online resources, we have tried multiple things. We've tried pop-ups, we've tried embedding a survey link at the end, we've tried soliciting feedback from the community, and it's really hard to get feedback from a resource that's openly accessible, because it's one extra step that people often don't engage in. And those that do, you're probably getting biased responses anyway. The people that are happy with it and excited are the ones that give you feedback, or very frustrated. It's one extreme or the other. And so I think that type of conversation about how we get this community input and how we can effectively measure the impact of the education and training work that we're doing in this kind of remote environment would be great. And then speaking to something else that you were saying, Nancy, in terms of the ESIP short courses and the fact that they were produced in 2012, we went through the same thing with the education modules, and we actually undertook a peer review process of our education materials, and I think Matt was involved with the working group at that point in time, and it was a huge effort to get the education materials peer reviewed, but they were updated as a result, because the landscape is changing and these materials need to be more dynamic. But the maintenance is a lot of work.
Yeah, we've talked about doing that in the past, and we did peer review at the beginning, of course, when they were created. But it's definitely time to do that now. That does take, you're right, it does take a lot of effort. So I like the idea of kind of broadening. In a way, it's broadening the discussion about assessment framework, but it's also, in a way, stepping back a step back from establishing a framework for this particular tool as the Clearinghouse itself. So if people are not ready to do that yet, I mean, I do think there's a value to people who are creating resources having some mechanism for knowing when they've created and how to create resources for different kinds of audiences that maybe the professional educators could also contribute to that discussion. But we don't have that group as part of our constituency at the moment, really. We've tried to make some connections to the education committee, for instance, at ESIP, and haven't gotten a lot of response yet because their focus is more on K through 12 really than what we're doing. But that's something that we can continue to try to work on, and in the meantime have this discussion, which would also be really valuable. So that sounds good to me too. It's just continuing, just having the discussion and bringing more people into that whole idea of how to look at resources and their impact on the community would certainly, I think, be of interest to ESIP, and at this kind of a session. So that sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I think a more general session is more likely to get more people because
right.
Just like we've talked about, this is a general problem for sure, and a general challenge to gather this information and do it in a systematic and non-biased way, etc. And even to gather it at all. Yeah. So in that sense, I think you'll get interest from people who even don't even know about the clearinghouse, right? They're just interested in this general question.
Right. Right.
So I think that's kind of maybe what you were just pointing to, sort of the relative value of having a general discussion on this versus really digging into trying to sketch it out for this particular tool.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing we can actually do. That digging down into how to do it for the clearinghouse is something we can do later on, especially if it's written into the grant, and we have groups who are focused on that particular topic. Then that's the sort of thing I think a review or editorial board would be more interested in focusing on probably. And so if that is developed, then if we can develop that, then we can take that there. So okay, so that means so data collections, and I think we can find. I don't know, Amber, you're going to be. Would you be available to kind of be part of the discussion about how you've approached assessment in Data 1 at a session like this? Are you going to be there or be remotely available?
Yeah, so right now I'm not slated to be there, but I might see if I can change that, but certainly remote if I'm not there in person.
Okay, that'd be great. And Sophie is not going to be there either, but she could also talk about how she developed and what she looked at in terms of developing this tool itself. So because she said she looked at a lot of different tools and approaches and that sort of thing. So and I know she has a presentation she's given at a couple of other places, but not at ESIP. So maybe a section of that, a subsection of that would work. And so in terms of data collections, Matt, how would you is there some sort of a way you could present what you know about that in a session like this if you're going to be available?
Yeah, I can think about it. I need to look at the schedule because there's one other session that I'm hosting, and I need to make sure they're not
conflicting.
Yeah. I can try to do that here quickly, but
or maybe somebody else that you could recommend.
Yeah, we can. And if you want, I think we're gonna have a fairly full agenda for the next data stewardship call, which is on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're able to attend there, I think we have a little bit of time slated for discussion of maybe AGU and ESIP things. And so if you wanted to sort of put out a call, so to speak, for actually people to talk about that, because everyone, and many people will have things to talk about, at least things that they've done.
Yeah.
So it might not be that they're super, fully fleshed out PowerPoints, but I think a lot of people will be able to say, we did this and we did that, and this was really useful, and this over here, just like Amber was saying.
Yep.
It didn't work quite as well. Maybe there's some consistency to those stories that we could try to gather. But if you're going to be on the call on Monday, I can definitely call on you to sort of put out that. But if I'm free during that session, or if I'm available in that session, I'd be happy to contribute to that as well.
Okay. Yeah, and as you say, it doesn't necessarily need to be PowerPoints. Just setting the stage and being able to talk about the approaches that have been taken, and what worked and what not would be helpful too. So that's great.
We could even think about putting together a few questions and just be very simple. How have you gone about assessing the use of your resources and for what purposes? What worked, what didn't work, what would you do in the next time? Those kinds of things. I think people could respond to fairly directly.
Yeah. You mean as a prep for the discussion itself?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I can be there on Monday, so I'll plan to do that. Great. Yay. Okay. Well, that could be a really another interesting discussion, I hope. So, good. Anything else anybody has about that? Wants to suggest or? Okay. The final one then, well, not the final one, but the second one on the agenda, the moving a project from incubator to production. Just to give you a little context for that's something that, again, Aaron and I had talked about at the boot camp, the Science Gateways boot camp, because part of what, two things. First of all, SGCI is applying to be a member of ESIP, and ESIP is applying to be a member of that group as well. So there will be Science Gateway people there at ESIP, hopefully, or at least they hopefully would be interested in talking about the different kinds of issues that they talk about in their boot camp for helping a project move from incubation to more of a production status. But and then my original thought was that maybe they could be there and we could talk about it using the Clearinghouse to Science Education Gateway as an example. But then when I was talking to Aaron about it a little bit more, it's definitely a question that ESIP has been facing for a number of years with the test bed projects and other kinds of projects, that have started at ESIP, and ESIP is really good at that. But then, the next step of helping a project move to more of a production status really is something that is a little more difficult to do. So she was thinking it might be, and I agree that it might be really interesting to kind of broaden that discussion a little bit, so that, again, the Clearinghouse might be an example of it, because we can, talk about a couple of the tools that they suggest at the boot camp for thinking along those lines of how to move things through. Maybe Chris Lenhart could come and talk about it from the point of view of projects at RENC, because he's gone through the boot camp and has some ideas and so on. But, just that whole, an opportunity to discuss, what the process is and what successes have been, which projects have been successful or on the stage or have failed in moving from incubation to production would be something that would be of interest generally, and especially within the context of using the Clearinghouse as a context. So that's something else that we thought about doing. I have not yet talked to Chris Lenhart or to Science Gateway people, because I wanted to have the discussion here first. But how does that sound to people for a session that?
I think that sounds useful, because that is a continuous challenge we all face at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. It was. I think it would. Erin said she might also try to be available, or maybe Annie Burgess as well, because she's been working with the test bed, and others who've been on that committee. Products and Services is now gone, but that, because it's taken up by the ESIP lab, but that whole question of how to do that might be useful. So do you think maybe Annie could talk about it a little bit? Again, it could be that same sort of a few presentations or a few presentations to kind of set the context and say one way of doing it, but then have other broader discussion as well. Could be useful. Do people have projects in mind? Are you thinking of any in particular, Carl, that are in the process of moving or have failed? I mean, failure is. I mean, I'm hoping the Clearinghouse is not one of those failure ones, but
Well, I think about some work we've been doing in sort of platform development for data management, and it remains one of those sort of perpetual development projects that remains sort of still somewhat siloed within the projects that it has been developed and supporting without sort of breaking out into broader use.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, I think that may be sort of an example of, I think, a lot of groups that, and this would probably resonate with a fair number of ESIP folks in terms of, having a broader vision of developing a capability that is built and is used within the context of a project. And even if there is some broader community integration, its center of gravity is still around that project. And until you can sort of break out of that project boundary, you're still sort of in the incubator.
Right.
In some respects, and Amber can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something that is similar to what Data One is having to look at right now in terms of the transition and an expanded sustainability model that goes beyond the core of support that is received from NSF, and looking at a diversified portfolio of activities and sponsors to be able to continue to move the capabilities that have been developed forward in the absence of sort of that cornerstone of funding. Is that a reasonable characterization, Amber?
Yes, it is. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, another example that I can think of is that the whole tool match project that I worked on for a number of years, through ESIP, there's a lot of promise to it and a lot of people are interested in it, but it, never quite got off the ground for a number of reasons. And there are different reasons, and it's a different stage even of incubation than you're talking about, Carl, and that the Clearinghouse is now as well. But it's some of the same issues could certainly be discussed. And if we can get either somebody from Science Gateway to talk briefly about what they do in the boot camp, and or reuse even some of their slides that we got through the boot camp, then that could be one way that we could start the discussion. So, and then again, have other people either have a couple minutes to talk about different projects that they've got and different issues they raised or whatever, and then have a discussion. I think that could be a good session and hopefully help ESIP as well move on. So, okay, great. All right. Well, so again, maybe let's see. I'll just send out general information about that, and maybe talk to Carl and also Chris Lenhard and Aaron about this as well. I'll proceed on that a little bit and then ask people if I need help on that one. That'd be great. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So we only have 3 minutes left. The other thing just to tell you is I'm hoping to do some testing with the ESIP student fellows on different aspects of kind of usability testing of the Clearinghouse, including as a way to get a better sense of how we could best kind of make the workflow more scalable of submitting resources and then reviewing and doing the editorial process. So I see that as something that we're going to have to deal with fairly soon. Hopefully, my fingers are crossed that we have to deal with this fairly soon. But when we start getting more people involved in both submitting and possibly doing reviewing of the resources that are in there, but that if people are interested in knowing more about that, contact me and I can especially if you're going to be at ESIP, because I could probably use some help there. And then one other thing now that David's on. David, do you want to just give us a quick little report about where we are with the enhancements on the Clearinghouse that we've got funded through the ESIP working group?
I'm here.
Okay.
So we've doing this anonymous submission form, so people don't have to log in to submit basic information, so you can post one in say 30 seconds or so. So that's going to go up this week, and we've also added a system to run through all the links in the published learning resources to make sure they're still good. So we'll pick up any 404s or non-responsive sites and email the moderator once a day with any issues. So that should help with maintaining the QA on the learning resources in the catalog. And yeah, we have adding some framework facets to the search. And I think that's the first sprint, and also in that sprint, yeah, we're getting together some usage statistics using the existing Google Analytics system. Yeah, and the priorities for the next sprint are pretty much open, so I think that could be a topic for discussion in a future call, Nancy.
That's good.
You on that one.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we've got the next call is early December, since we rescheduled this one, so that would fit right in there a little bit before AGU. But yeah, we have some, kind of a list of a wish list, and honing that down could be done both on a call and online. So yeah, that's a good idea. Great. Any questions about that? One other thing I should mention is I had put in a proposal for a practicum, getting a couple of a student to do a practicum or practique, would be the plural of practicum, with the Clearinghouse from UIUC, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I've got two students who are interested, and I'm talking with them today. We'll see how it goes. One of them is more of a data analyst, and the other is more interested in metadata. So hopefully we'll have the one person helping to find resources to put into the inventory, and then actually using the form to add them. So that help that process, and then the other one may help out with usage statistics. I'll find out more about that when I talk with them later today. So that's progress too, which is great. So, okay, we're 1 minute over. If anybody has anything else to add or ask or report. Great.
Nope.
Okay. Sounds good.
And I'll share with the group as soon as I hear anything from IMLS.
Yeah. Everybody.
And I sent off an inquiry as to what the state of their review process is.
Good.
But it remains to be seen whether or not there will be a response.
Yeah, I hope so. Fingers and toes crossed.
Right.
Yeah. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Good discussions. Thanks very much for your help. We'll be in touch.
Great.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Amber.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye, Bruce. Thanks. I'll be in touch.